Hi everyone, this is lecture 4.1, Micro-Level Factors in Policing. We are continuing our conversations for Sociology 2120. So in this lecture we will talk about traditional policing methods. We will also talk about evidence-based practice in policing. So the two real distinctions in what we're talking about are those methods that are used because it's always been that way, and those methods that have been used evidence with. So let's talk about traditional policing methods. The idea of the police is very old and it's very widespread. Most societies have had different types of police forces. Not all of those societies that have had police forces, though, have had their basis in science and their basis in rationality. So science is really present in our society. We use science to talk about, for example, medicine, or we use science to talk about how we build buildings, right? We don't necessarily always use science to talk about how we do policing. And many of our police traditions come from other societies who also don't use necessarily social science or rationality or rational modes of doing things to do policing. We use more folk knowledge, sometimes what we call common sense. So the difference between traditional methods and evidence-based practice methods is illustrated by comparing traditional and evidence-based practice patrolling methods. There are all kinds of different elements that go into policing, but for this lecture specifically, we are talking about patrolling and what it means to patrol and why you would patrol. So there are a number of rationales and methods for this. Problem locations is a very basic concept in terms of patrolling. So the idea is that police should focus on resources at a specific location. So if there is a perception that there are a lot of criminals in one spot, then we will therefore use that place as an example of where we should send more police. The chief thinks that this is a bad neighborhood, so the police go to that neighborhood. Or the neighborhood that everyone knows is dangerous, right? Everyone just knows it. Well, who's everyone? How do they know it? Is that based on science? Is that based on perception? Is that based on your perception of the people who live in that neighborhood? Is it based on actual crime? Who knows? But everyone knows it, right? That is not scientific thinking. That is not scientific thinking. Another type of traditional method is something that's called random preventative patrol. So this is a tactic of police officers used in perceived hazard zones. So if police are concerned, basically they want to scare people into the perception of omnipresence. And there are a number of reasons why you would do this. If you are a well-intending police officer and police force, and you are legitimately afraid that something bad is going to happen, you want to try to scare as many criminals as possible into thinking that they're going to get caught. That's definitely one application of this. Or if you are a tyrannical government, and like the Nazi Party in World War II, that wanted to make people believe that, cops could just show up at any time and do anything they wanted to anyone, that is another application of random preventative patrol. This type of patrol is good for deterring crime. It is. It's good at doing that. It is also can be good for public relations because it shows that if you want the public to believe that police are everywhere, then yeah, it's good. It is not inherently good, though, at changing criminal behavior or necessarily even catching all criminals. Another traditional patrolling method is what's called profiling. And I meant to highlight profiling here to be bolded. Profiling is the traditional method. We base this off of who looks suspicious. And there have been many historic examples of this in our recent past. Profiling is another, I'm sorry about that. Profiling is another non-scientific based approach. In the 1990s, there was a major policy known as stop and frisk in the New York City area, where police officers could stop any person on the street they thought could potentially be a criminal, which from a rational standpoint, if you just hear those words, could sound like, well, I guess that's fair because we trust police, and why would they stop someone that they don't think is a criminal? The reality of the matter is that the people that they stopped were almost always young Black males who were perceived to be in gangs. This young man right here would have been perceived, based on how he was dressed, to be a young gang member. The reality is, though, most teens dressed like that in the 1990s, and his only guilt was being of a certain demographic, right? That's the problem in stop and frisk stuff. It's not based on science, it's based on people's perceptions of people and prejudice. Now we have Arizona's citizenship question laws that are present in our society now in terms of patrolling, where officers can ask people if they have reasonable suspicion, which means they're Latino, to ask them if they are American citizens, right? And that also is another example of profiling, right? There, as you very well know, as someone who lives in New Mexico or near there, that we have had Latino-like people in that part of the world for forever, right? Just because you have browner skin does not mean you just came to this country, right? That is a version of profiling. This raises major Fourth Amendment issues. Americans love to talk about the First and Second Amendment, and we don't talk about the Fourth Amendment much. The Fourth Amendment states that the people have the right to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects against unreasonable search and seizure, and that shall not be violated, and et cetera, et cetera. The question of stop and frisk laws and citizenship questions is, what is unreasonable search and seizure? That's the debate around all of this. Some people say that the police have the right to ask you a few questions. Other people say the police absolutely do not have the right to ask you those questions if you don't want to answer them, and that they absolutely cannot search your body, and especially not search your home. That is the debate there. What is, quote, unreasonable search? Now let's look at some evidence-based practice methods. So these are those methods that we do have science to back up, right? And some of them are not that different than the traditional methods, but we have science. One of those is called hotspots policing, a practice in which police agencies experiment with patrol tactics related to problem locations. So based on time and specific locations as to when crimes are thought to be happening, then police change their patrolling methods based off of when crimes happening. And that sounds a lot like the problem locations idea, but it's actually based on data, right? So instead of just going off of a feeling that an area is bad, we actually base it off of where citizens have actually reported crimes. Another evidence-based practice method is called problem-oriented policing. This is a lot different than what we often think of in terms of policing. We gear this toward policing toward determining types of activities that should be performed by officers while at problem places. So we are not changing the location, We're not trying to take criminals out of locations. We're not trying to make even necessarily places safer. We are trying to make police officer behavior the element that can change the community. We're trying to make police officers interact better with the community, maybe see if, part of patrolling is actually talking to people and become part of the community. And maybe helping, kids get their pets out of trees and stuff, right? And that's very much also part of policing, instead of just running down criminals and catching as many criminals as you can. So we change the officer, not the location. Another evidence-based practice method is called pulling levers. This identifies high-risk chronic offenders. So when you do actually catch someone who is someone who's broken the law, a criminal, we then try to help that offender to prevent future behavior. We metaphorically pull levers on that person, that deviant, that criminal, and help them try to become better people so that they don't break the law in the future. So in this model, we are focusing on stopping the offender by helping the offender. Another evidence-based practice method is called order maintenance. In order maintenance, a police tactic focuses on managing minor offenses and community disorders. This is sometimes called the broken windows hypothesis. It's an interesting idea. So the premise is that if there is a broken window in a neighborhood, or that's why it's called broken windows, if there's something out of order, if there's something disorder, if there's something that should be cleaned up, this says two things to the police officer. Either something just happened, so a criminal broke a window and is trying to get in, or nobody in that neighborhood is cleaning up the broken window, and that also indicates that there is social disorder in the neighborhood. Either way, police should investigate. This is a gray area kind of method because it has been controversial among some criminologists, saying that, well, that's only really a little bit better than the problem locations model. Maybe that broken window just means nobody has the money or resources to try to fix that window. So this one's in a gray area. Finally, we have some difficulties with evidence-based practice methods. First of all, with evidence-based practice, in developing it, we are reliant on index crimes. So these are serious crimes such as high-profile murders, commercial robberies, strings of auto thefts. And index crimes are more likely to gain public attention. And because they gain public attention, we're more likely to focus on these kinds of things in our evidence-based research. So if we don't focus on other crimes that don't gain attention, then those other crimes, even if there are more of them, won't get that kind of attention that the index crimes do. And that is a major issue in evidence-based methods. Another problem is what's called crime displacement. This occurs when offenders react to police tactics by altering their behaviors, thus being able to get away with it and get around police. So if law enforcement are trying to stop criminals from doing a certain thing, and then the criminals learn and they change their behavior, well, that creates another cycle, right? Which is really, that's a story as old as police and policing. But these are difficulties that police face as well. That is it for this lecture. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I will be glad to try to help you.